Hi, everyone. 50 years ago, Dungeons and Dragons launched for the first time. 7 years ago, I ran my first game for my roommate and a couple friends. It was a complete disaster. But today, we're talking about the new 2024 edition of the 5th edition Player's Handbook for Dungeons and Dragons. I'm super excited about it. Sean's super excited about it. Our producer, Ryan, is super excited about it. We have so many thoughts about this book that we've discussed and will be discussing on this episode, and we cannot wait to share it with you on this episode of the Vanguard Chronicles. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Vanguard Chronicles podcast, a podcast where we have an ongoing conversation into the creative process behind the Vanguard, our monthly crowdsourced D&D campaign of interconnected one-shots. Everybody, you know it at this point. I'm your host and one of the Dungeon Masters of the Vanguard, Nathan, also known as Spark Ascendant, and I'm joined as always by my co-host and fellow Vanguard DM, Sean, also known as General Grom. How are you doing today, General? Oh, sorry. Okay. For anyone who's listening to this episode of the podcast on Spotify, Sean is currently paging through a very special topic we're having for this episode because we are talking about the 2024 Player's Handbook. And we were supposed to have it read before. Are you done?
Yes, I just finished.
All right, cool.
So
Good.
I think I'm ready to go.
Good. Sweet.
I'm
All
doing
right,
well,
cool.
Nathan. How are you?
Doing good. I'm not gonna say we're excited because it's already coming out. We have spent so much time in our pre-show talking about this and running through. We have spent quite a bit of time looking at this. But before we dig into the topic and start to talk about our thoughts on the 2024 Player's Handbook, of course, we always have to talk about our charity endeavors, and we have a lot of exciting stuff to talk about. So, Sean, why don't you take it away?
When we started this over a year and a half ago, we knew we wanted a way to give back and help people in need. That led us to support extralife.org, a charity that helps Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. The money we raise at our Vanguard Unite events through 50/50 raffle and a themed beer tap go directly to helping kids and their families during some of the hardest times in their lives. There are even more ways you can make a difference. Click the QR code on the screen and the link in the description and join our team to make a donation directly. Our friends at Golden Alchemy Crafts generously donate 10% from the sale of our exclusive house-themed dice trays. And very soon, we're launching our own new web store where you can grab some awesome merch, like shirts, plus new items like hats and hoodies. Our community just got even bigger as we made an alliance with Misty Mountain Gaming, and they've got some amazing RPG gear. Head over to their site and check it out. I just got my loot box, and it was packed with some great stuff. If you use the discount code Vanguard at checkout, you'll get 10% off your order, and they'll donate 10% to the charity. We have another big announcement, but I'll let Nathan handle that.
On November 3rd, we're doing Tabletop for Chop at Days of Nights in Newark, Delaware. It's going to be our live streamed marathon charity event, telethon event. We've been putting a lot of effort into it. Sean, I know, has been putting in a chunk of effort in order to get the layout for it, to have all our sound stuff right. We actually just did a live stream test that you can find on our YouTube channel or on twitch.tv/Vanguard Guild D&D. One more time, that's twitch.tv/Vanguard Guild D&D. This was a live test where we had a bunch of players at Sean's house with a wonderful DM, Charlotte, running things. I played a game. Our producer, Ryan, played in the game as well. Fair warning to anyone who listens to it or watches, it is a test. We were testing our equipment. We were testing the setup. I know we got a lot of feedback we were super excited for. One of the big ones being the sound and some of the audio. But please, if you are interested at all in seeing what we're planning for November 3rd, please check it out on YouTube or on Twitch. Help us with those watch hours as well. Help us get the, you know how it is. All the social media, all of the metrics, everything we got to do in this game so we can spread this event to as many people as possible. We are super excited for Tabletop for Chop. We're going to be having donations, raffle drives from, I think I've been told that I will potentially be getting a pie in the face, which tells me that Ryan will pay any amount of money to have me take a pie in the face. We're looking at doing a drawing for a 3D printed Tarask model we have that's insanely cool. Looking at doing donation pledges based on Nat 20s and Nat 1s rolled. Other kinds of raffle giveaways for our local people, some of our DMs. I know I'm offering a free personal session at Days of Nights as a DM. We've got a lot of big plans for it, and we are super, 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 super excited. I know I am, at least. I know you are too, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited. Days of Nights, which is the oldest gaming store here in the state of Delaware. They're fantastic, and it's a great place to go and get into not only Dungeons and Dragons, but RPGs in general and other board games. They have such a wide variety of stuff. You definitely should check it out. But yeah, they've been gracious. They're going to be discounts on RPGs and RPG merchandise and minis and stuff. They're going to do a lot for us. We're going to have pick from the magic bag of dice, and if you get the right dice, you can win another prize. There's going to be all kinds of giveaways. We got food trucks coming by. It's going to be a full day of celebrating D&D and playing D&D, but also raising money for the charity and helping kids at CHOP. It's going to be pretty cool.
And of course, for any of our actual players for our regular game, there will be incentives in there for you guys too, to include potentially free level ups. And I even talked about a 1-up, but we'll see about that. So I think it's time that we start to dig in, because this is, you and I are both buzzing to talk about this.
Right.
So let's talk about the 2024 Player's Handbook. First off, a quick disclaimer we do need to throw out here. Joking aside, Sean, did you actually read every single page in the Player's Handbook?
No.
No. I did not either. Just as a case in point, if you're coming here because you are looking for, first off, you're looking for a product review, this is a review, but I wouldn't call it a product review. We're not coming at it from that lens. We're coming at it as, fans of D&D and DMs. Speaking to myself, I am predominantly a DM. I don't play as often. So although I did create a character with this new rule set, which you can see on that live stream test, and although I, did look through some of the class options and some of the changes available, this is not going to be a review of every single change and every tweak made to every single class.
No, not at all. This is that discussion. We might get into that later. Join us, like, subscribe. Join us in the comments. Say something. You want us to talk more about it. Yeah, we can get specific, but this is not that discussion for now. That I think we want to talk about more of how it influences the game and how we feel it influences our game at the Vanguard.
And we also did take the time to make some comparisons between the 2024 book and the 2014. Like, I had them both side by side when I was skimming through it and reading some pages. We'll reference that more in detail later. But also, if you're looking for a direct everything, like if you want patch notes, again, this is not it. This is more, honestly, this episode's two very passionate nerds talking about a cool ass new book that just dropped.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really all this is.
So, with that out of the way, Sean, kick it off for us. First impressions, general ideas. Did it meet your expectations? What do you think of the new book?
Well, given 10 years to go from 2014 to now, I expected a significant amount of upgrades and a significant amount of detail, like fleshing out in parts that they liked, that they didn't like, things what they could fix. And I will say, the artwork, the layout, the way it flows is so much better.
Oh
What
my
I didn't
God.
like about 2014 was you tend to go back and forth through pages to find references, and it got clunky. The glossary in this thing in the 2024 is amazing.
Oh my God. We have so many things we're probably going to mention numerous times over the course of this book. The old 2014 book, to play normally, Googling was a necessity. The new
Right.
book, I'll still Google out of habit. And I'd say, like, because Googling still, I think in some ways will be quicker, but it is no longer critically a necessity, which when you're introducing to new people is such a huge thing. And that's one of my biggest takeaways is it is very clear that both for DMs and players, this is a much, much, much more usable book. Like, my design sensibilities were kicking off the entire time I was reading through this.
It's absolutely laid out much better. It's absolutely designed for usability versus knowledge. And it's one thing to have knowledge, and I think as DMs, we want to know you can't be a good DM without understanding how the player mechanic works and understanding how it flows back and forth. Because once you understand it, it makes it easier for you to interact with those players and make your players have much more fun because you can find their motivation instinctually, not necessarily waiting for exposition. There's so many things in the way this book is written that organize itself in a way that you will find information quicker, easier, and much more concise than in 2014.
And I really want to emphasize, you said it's, better for you and your players. That keyword you and your, or keywords you and your, I think are so important too, because there's
Yeah.
so much more. I am like beyond excited now for the new DMG and the new monster manual. Like those are going to be 4-hour episodes,
Yeah.
because if this is the amount of customization and customizability, like the emphasis on making D&D yours that you get through reading this book, especially in comparison to the 2014 one, I can just only imagine what it will be like when we get to, again, our favorite toys.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the DMG and the new monster manual. I think this is a great start, and they put their foot down in a great way. They've moved this new set of knowledge base for all new players and new people getting into the game. It's definitely a step in the right direction. They simplified, streamlined a lot of
Oh
things
my
that
god.
they needed to help the game, to help the process of learning and access to it much easier.
Yeah, a lot makes more sense. You have more of the content up front as opposed to the nitty-gritty details. Ironic as well, because like those more important details that you need, such as like the most basic one of how to play, is front and center. And on top of that, like, I mean, they even put like way more expanded play sessions up front as well too. Like all kinds of examples that go into way more detail than they did in the player's handbook, and really illustrate, I think, the way that I know you teach D&D when you're teaching it to new people, the way I teach to new people when I play D&D. And even there was a very viral video that went out recently of Deborah Ann Wool explaining D&D to oh, I forget, is it John Bernthal, I think, the guy who plays the Punisher, and
Yeah.
doing that thing of explaining the game through just putting a person into it, right? Describing a
Right.
scenario as if you are a DM, and teaching that, and putting them in that situation, so that, again, that line between, oh, D&D seems really complicated, oh, I don't really know that I can play it, and like that expectation of what it is to what it actually is, and the freedom and the creativity, and it just takes off from there. And this book just really does a great job of showing that out.
It really supports the concept of imagination being a key component in the way this game is played.
Mhm.
You're right, a lot of people start playing it, or when they wanna play it and they go, "Oh, wow, this seems like a lot of stuff. Do I have to remember all this? It seems like more than I." It doesn't seem as simple as just playing a game, but once you immerse them into it and start to realize, and especially through the way this player's handbook kind of describes things, it helps them kind of get on board with that concept a much easier, and that pathway to, "Oh, I get what you're saying.
Mhm.
This makes sense, and I can work with this story." It promotes the yes and theory of
Yes.
D&D really, really well.
It, like, another way I view it, and another way I've been describing it to people is, so when I show new people Dungeons and Dragons, I would like to sometimes, if they're interested, if they're really interested, like, I think I do want to play. Right? They're beyond just curious about it. They genuinely, they think they want to try it out.
Right.
I might loan them the player's handbook, or tell them to look into it and to pick it up, just because, like, hey, you want to play D&D? Like, it's a cool thing. And
Right.
check out the book and get them in, so that they have that investment to get them to start reading, so they can get to all the creative prompts and fanciful descriptions and things that are in there that will get your creative juices flowing and get you thinking like, oh wow, this is really cool, right? That's the 2014 book. The new book, I legitimately, not a word of a lie, and we're not sponsored by Wizard of the Coast. Again, this is not a product review, but if you are in any way curious about Dungeons and Dragons, in any way, like, I have friends who listen to this podcast who, they don't play D&D. They played it like once or twice at a con with me, but that's it. I legitimately would recommend this book as just a cool thing to own. from the art and the ideas and everything it presents and the way it is presented to make it a much more understandable and readable. Like the old one felt like a textbook. This one feels like a game book.
Right. Absolutely. That's a great analogy. The 2014, albeit good, and it really has kind of, I mean, laid the groundwork for most of 5e and what we've all been playing. So let's not discount it, but you're right. It was much more like a textbook. And a lot of the earlier books were in that same kind of vein, which was there were textbooks. And it made you kind of look at it more as like I have to go through school to play a game. And this is more of a game book, a set of game rules. It's just laid out in a better way. It
Yeah.
makes it easier for you to understand.
Well, honestly, that's all the segue I need. Why don't we really dig into that specifically? Because I mean, we keep talking about the layout, and because legitimately, I mean, there are so many examples of the layouting being so good in this book, and like this might be the nerdiest thing we talk about today. It's not like the Dungeons and Dragons, but it's like the layout of the text. But legitimately, like if you have even just a tangential interest in design, like usability, user experience, product design, any of
Right.
that, take the 2014 book, take the 2024 books, look through the two of them, and really just we will mention things that we found in this book that we think are super cool. Let me tell you something. Not a word of a lie. I have a whole list of new rules. I took like notes as I was going through of new rules, new things they added that like, oh my God, that's so cool. Oh, that's a new thing they added. Oh, I'm glad they spelled this out. And then I went to the 2014 book, and you know what I realized? They were in the 2014 book. I just didn't
Right.
know it because,
Right.
and you can call me a bad DM if you want, I didn't read every page cover to cover. So in my skimming through, and I've been playing since 2017, like
Right.
I just didn't know. I didn't know they were in there at all.
Same too. A lot of to try to read everything and remember it all is a lot. So, but especially the way the 2014 books were written, they didn't really. They were written in. I have to go back to this and jump around to get information, and the way they laid this one out and just where you find your information, where the wizard spells are within the wizard class. Like
Oh,
you're all on the same page. It's easier to find.
we'll talk about that in a minute. Jeez,
Yeah, it just makes your ability to sort information that much easier.
just a list of things that I did not know were in the 2014 book that I saw here. So I've talked before about how sometimes I'll use skills with different abilities. So like the classic example is like, use strength, a strength intimidation check. Cause like maybe your big fighter, he's really intimidating, but he doesn't have charisma for shit. Well, but he's big and burly, right? That example is in the 2024 book. I said, oh, cool. They added that. Fun fact. It's on page 14. If you want to look at it, because it's in a big highlighted box in the 2024 book. I forget what page it's on in the 2014 book. I only know it's in there because I looked it up because I said, wait a minute, I just want to double check. Did they add that in there?
Right,
Um,
it's not an ad.
yeah, they've got the rules for knocking out a creature. So like when you bring someone down to 0 HP, and you say, hey, I don't want to kill him. I always thought that like depending on the attack, you're good in the official rules. So like if I shoot them with a bow, right, I
Right,
want to hit them in the shoulder so that way they're knocked unconscious. I don't want to kill them. No, the rules specifically say it's a melee. It's not a range attack. It has to be a melee
right,
attack. Didn't know
right.
that. It's in the 2014, not highlighted. Uh, oh my God, the number one, like this one blew my mind. The trinkets chart.
Yeah,
The trinkets. You want to talk about like when if you want to understand why we're geeking out so much about just usability and layout in this podcast, which also, if you're hearing about layout and you're still listening to the podcast, thank you. Please subscribe. I think you'd like our content. But but in the 2014 book, there's a big ass random number chart of trinkets, just random trinkets. And there's a little paragraph right before the chart that says, hey, when you create your character, by the way, this is in the equipment section. I want to be clear on that. Hey, when you create your character, you can roll on this chart and just get a free little trinket, a little piece of flavor for your character. Because that's in the equipment section, I always saw the chart in the equipment. I'm like, oh, it's a cute little trinket. So if I just need an equipment, a trinket as a DM that someone's carrying, I'll just roll on that table. And it's there
right.
for that. But fun fact, that description that it can be used for when you create your character is in the immediate preceding paragraph, but it's on an entirely separate page. So every time I flipped through the book, I just saw the big chart. I never saw the paragraph because it was just text on the previous page, and I kept
Right.
scrolling because I didn't think it was relevant. Even worse, because it was in the equipment section, not the character creation section, which is where it is now. So that now,
Mhm.
hey, when you're creating your character, oh, by the way, if you want to give a little extra flavor, here's this chart of trinket stuff, and it's all on the same page, which is also how I found it, because I was flipping through and I said, oh, what are the trinkets supposed to be? Because they were where I saw them, as opposed to in a corner where I didn't care.
Right. It is a lot about how visually when you read something and they've kind of used their knowledge of what is going on with like D&D Beyond and where people go online and look and where they swipe and what they click and how they follow. They've made this book usable outside of being online, which I
Yeah.
think is one of the things that makes it really good, is that you can sit around a table with no computers, no phones, and detached lo-fi play this game. And I think that's actually really kind of cool because you can use the books in a orderly fashion in a way that it's easy to get to information. One of the things I noticed, even in when we did our live stream test, one of the things that is tricky is that when you find, okay, I have to look something up, how does that detract from what you're watching? Because everybody's pausing while you look it up. The way this book is written, it's easier to get the stuff, so you get to it faster. It makes it easier to read, makes it easier to understand. They did such a great job in understanding how we play the game and how this information needs to be given to us.
I think an example, I think of that's just been in my mind a lot recently is so I play a lot of tabletop board games, and in the board game space, Kickstarter is a huge thing. Anyone who follows modern board games, spends their time on Board Game Geek, knows how big Kickstarter is and crowdfunding stuff is. And a common trend you'll see with a lot of these big Kickstarters is they'll announce a new game coming up, and you can back it at the base level and get just the board game. And then, hey, if you get the super mega awesome, huge, oh my god, you're our best friend in the world tier, it comes with like 30 expansions. I'm exaggerating a little bit in some cases. Um,
It's a mega it's a minor it's a kind of the mini transaction concept, and
right,
I'm not really a big fan of that.
right. It's preying off of FOMO. But the problem
Right.
is, and the problem with it from a design perspective in that case is, oftentimes, not always, I say this as someone who sometimes backs those characters at those games, those tiers. Oftentimes, not only is there the issue of you haven't played the game, so you won't know if the expansion's any good or not, but anytime a game releases, you will never have as many playtesters as you will after release. That's when the game goes
Right.
out. As a result, a lot of times those expansions you might get in a big Kickstarter project are chasing content. And so they're just adding stuff, but they don't know if it will work. I
Right.
draw this example to say that the 2024 PHB is an example of them not doing that. You can
Right.
see how this is a game and a rule system that has been out for 10 years, and they have had time to not just play test it themselves over and over again, tweaking stuff from book to book to book. We kind of got
Right.
a soft patch in Tasha's some years ago, in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. But on top of that, taking player feedback, like so
Right.
many things you will hear us talk about and have heard us talk about in this episode, is stuff that been some issue somewhere and has been talked about in message boards and forums, in feedback to Unearthed Arcana, or just on Twitter, on X, whatever you call it. And it has all that feedback has been taken in, and you can tell that it has been put to use to create this edition of the book.
Absolutely. One of the things I do really enjoy is how they've really made a conscious effort to put the details up in the front and kind of the generalities in the back, which is what happened in 2014, and then they kind of flipped that to go the other way around, where you get the meat and your content up front to get you enthused and you're inspired by it, and then the details that kind of fill that place in later.
I
I
say
think that really helped. I helped in the way you understood the rule set.
again, like we keep saying this because it's a big deal. They put the rules on how to play up front
Hmm.
before you create your character. Before you do the thing like, oh, what kind of character do you want to play? I don't even know how the game works. Like, such a no-brainer that
Right.
all of us who've been playing have just accepted. But when you see it in the book, you suddenly realize that the 2014 book is trash. Not actually.
No, it was very functional. It did exactly what they wanted it to do, but Again, that's 10 years ago, and the players and much of the things that we notice with our Vanguard game is that it's an influx of players. You have those that are core players, and we love you guys absolutely 100%. Everything you bring to the game and everything you bring to our project is we couldn't be more appreciative of. But I also we see that as time goes on, you have players that aren't with us anymore, and that new players have come in, and we love that that flux because it adds to our stories and our development. But that is part of like now 2024 is a lot different than 2014. The way
Mhm.
you perceive information, the way our information is given to us has changed. So they did a really good job of adapting to how information is perceived, across the board, and that really does make this book a lot easier to read and a lot more inspirational to add to your games.
Totally. Like you mentioned towards the top of the episode, right? How there's a lot of like flipping back and forth in the 2014 book, and it's really evident in. I'll just give a couple things for like character customization stuff, right? Because if you look at the 2014 book, you understand the logic, right? Partial credit, but we now see the answer was wrong. Because like multi-classing was a section of the rules all itself, right?
Right, right.
Spell lists, like the class spell lists, like what are the wizard spells, the warlock spells,
Right.
all of those were in the spell section all by themselves. And it's organized, it makes sense. But you know what's more usable, Sean? And like a guy, it's blowing my mind. That's why I'm so excited about this, which is also crazy because I don't make characters that often because I
Yeah,
mostly DM.
watching him play was really fun.
Oh my god, the multi-classing for every class. Now you go to the class section, and instead of this whole section on multi-classing, which by the way they still have, so that
Right, right,
rules are in multiple places, so that any logical place you think it's there. But now go to the druid class. Hey, are you starting the druid at level 1? Here's what you get. Hey, are you multi-classing into druid? Here's what you get. Again,
right,
easy to find. So then instead of it being this variant rule off somewhere, so then you're like, oh, I want to make a druid. And then you go here and you don't even know multi-classing is a thing. You go there and like,
right,
multi-classing, what's that? And again, it's doing this to help you connect if you're a brand new player and have all these new thoughts. And the
right.
spell list, this one blew my mind. Because, oh my God, no shit. It's the simplest thing. It's so smart. And now instead of, hey, take, this spell from the wizard spell list. Okay, hold the page open because I want to be sure I have the right count of how many spells I need, right? And now flip
Right.
to the back of the book. God, Wizard's easier because at least it's in W. But if you're in Cleric, God forbid. And now it is in the Cleric section, the list of Cleric spells. You still need to go to the back for their what they do, or Google if you need to. But you know what? Before I'd Google the spell list because I'm not doing the flip back and forth. Now they're all right there in that section. And I mean, while we're here, let's talk about the new character customization and creation stuff. Again, not full details because we didn't read and compare everything, but just some of the notes because they've also made a lot of really smart changes here.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't, I haven't made a new character under the new system yet, and what I like about the book is that it almost feels the same intuitive nature as it does when you're online. When you click something, it gives you the information instantly. The book itself has that information in a way that, oh, I'm reading about druids or I'm reading about wizards. I can continue on within this section and actually understand and relate to those things versus like online, you click, it just takes you to those pages.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? The book itself has a much more uh, I want to use the term like online feel, but it's organized in a way that it's easier for you to get to those topics and those subject matter that you need to know when you want to know it. That's what I like about it.
I say this in the best way possible. That new player sheet, which for anyone is on page, I think it's page
Yeah, yeah,
34, the new character sheet. I mean, yeah, I looked at it and I said, this looks like a really intelligently designed web page. Like I can see the direct D&D
yeah.
comparisons, but I also don't mean that in a negative. We're like, oh, it looks like they did a web page. No, because by the way, for one, again, as someone who teaches D&D to new people a lot, the fact that now instead of being here's all your ability scores, here's just a list, a dumped list of all the skills. They're all now with their associated ability.
Which
Instead of
help,
oh, go
which
ahead.
helps players understand like why intimidation is this or why acrobatics or this. Like now, it does create a much more synergistic way of looking at your skill set.
And when
It's
you're
like skills. Go ahead.
and when you're leveling up, you can see what this ability score connects to. It's not a tiny
Right.
little parenthetical.
Right. Doesn't It's not abstractly related to it. It's actually connected to it. So, oh, I understand why I want to increase this ability or why I want to put more energy into this because for my character, it's going to benefit me in the long run.
The fact that class features are now front and center in the middle of
Yeah,
it.
it's huge.
The fact that, like, what are the most important things you need, especially during combat? AC, speed, health.
Right.
The center made a sense, but that's not how you read a document or a sheet of paper.
Right.
So where is that
Right.
actual important detail? At the top. At the top, baby. And on top of it, it's just so clean, so compartmentalized. It's so smart.
Yeah, it's just better organization, and that only came from time. Like, a lot of times when you implement something, you think what you're doing is going to be, "Oh, this is perfect." It's a great example in our Vanguard games that we start out with a concept or an idea, and over time, we start to realize that the way it's implemented may not work, and this is why we do tests. This is why we reach out to our wonderful community, on our Discord, to solicit their feedback on how we do things because we we're not the authority on this. We are just people who are trying to do something we love to help raise money for help kids and
Play some
to
D&D.
just play some D&D. But as we've done this, we've learned that there's a lot of complexity to servicing our players and servicing our community in a way that feels organic and feels right and feels smart and that makes us feel satisfied in what we're doing. And I cannot express this enough on how watching this grow in such a unique way, it's second to none.
Mhm.
And then to now they look to us as the authority on how we're going to implement these new rules.
Yeah, they're asking us how to
You
use this
know,
new stuff too.
because well, I mean, we've established ourselves in a way that says that we kind of know and that we're going to take care of. This is something we talk about in our pre-show. We talked a little bit about the trust of a DM
Mhm.
from his players and the trust that a DM has to his player. The trust goes back and forth. If I trust my players are going to play along and yes, and they're going to have a much better experience than someone who's going to constantly try to. I don't like what you're doing.
Mhm.
Like there's a certain point in this game that everybody has to connect on. Yes, this is what we're doing, and this is what we can make fun out of it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
this book does a really good job of helping new players understand that concept.
They put, and again, this might be in the 2014, but they put session 0, they mentioned the use of a session 0, which again, if it's in the 2014, I didn't see it. And I know I'm not emblematic of everyone, but like the fact that it's so front and center, like, hey, you might have a session 0 and plan stuff out with your DM in advance
Right.
is huge. The God, we don't even have time to get into like the spell sheet, the spell list for the character sheet. But if you're a spellcaster, enjoy that page. I think it's 34. It's right after the player sheet. The customization options, that just the
Yeah.
flexibility these rules give you, and the new character creation stuff gives you to create the kind of character that you want is enormous. Like just a couple. The fact that now all the weapon masteries, all the fighting styles, like if you didn't look at feats much before, look at the feats because
Right.
now fighting style is a type of feat. So if you're not a martial class and you just have a way to get a general feat, you can take that, right?
Yep.
The magic initiative feat lets you not just take spells from other classes, but you can use whatever modifier you want. So you're not
Right.
limited by the spellcasting modifier of that class and you didn't build into, right?
Right.
I
Right.
the new as a DM, I like the new common and rare languages distinction, which makes it so that instead of it so that now you pick two languages, two common languages, I believe, and you might get more based on your species, which we'll get to in 2 seconds. Now it's not, oh, I'm some random human who grew up on a farm. I know Abyssal. It's one of my chosen languages. Like,
Randomly understand celestial.
yeah, I love that
I just
codification.
I just I figured it out.
And now to get annoyingly controversial, also the way they have changed it from class race to the class origin system
Right.
is I think it's just so cool. First off, I say unfortunately controversial because some people took issue with the fact that they were changing it from race to species. First off, if you're the kind of person who's upset that they didn't like race,
Yeah.
that they stopped saying race, and that's sticking in your craw,
Right.
please unsub. We're good. I appreciate that. If you want to debate it, please go hop in our comments. Tell us how much you hate that they're not calling it race anymore. It's engagement for us either way. Afterwards, please unsub. But in the meantime, like I I love how now at this point, the way it works is in the old 2014 book. I'm gonna tell you right now, for at least 5 years, I sometimes would skip background when I was building a new character for players
Right.
because
It almost felt unnecessary.
yeah, because I thought it was just a background. Like it's just it's like hey, it's a little fluff for whatever. So I tell my players in a new session, just come up with whatever you want. Now it gives you a feat, and now you derive from it your ability scores. Your ability score increases. They're not tied to your race or species, and instead you get other abilities from that. Which again, from a story standpoint, makes sense because you might be an outcast from your particular society. It's a nurture versus nature, and also
Right.
has precedent in D&D history. Like the origins of D&D, sorry, not or the origins, excuse me, one of the most iconic characters of D&D. I got excited, and we're talking about origins. One
He
of
was
the
really excited.
one of the most excited. Dang it, you got me thrown off. One of the most iconic characters in D&D lore is Driz Do'Urden, and his whole
Right.
premise is that he is a drow. He is, by his race, he is an evil elf. And even R.A. Salvatore then later tweaked the lore of the drow in his own books to kind of get away from that ickiness. Like that, quite frankly, that ickiness. Like I get the history, the trends, flaws in Tolkien's writing. I don't have time to get any of that. I understand that that's a premise there and that exists, but it's not needed for the game. And even more so,
Right.
if it is important to you because of the integrity of the lore of the world you're running in your game, then
Right.
there you can still enforce those, but they're not critical to the rule system. It's the same reason that warlocks and paladins can be in the same party together, because in the old editions, they were not allowed to. It was not in the rules. But now I can make it fit my setting.
Yeah, that's huge. That changes anytime you can add to the story concepts, you can make your stories more flexible and not just get locked into one trope or another. That's when the game, I think D&D gets a little bogged down. Is
Mhm.
that everybody wants to be, you remember when it first started, in first edition. I was around when that happened.
I read about
First
it.
edition, you had a yes, I know you could be a dwarf, you could be an elf, you could, a fighter, a cleric, a wizard. You were locked into this is what I was. So everything else is wrapped around that premise. And now 2024, to be able to separate and tell the kind of stories, how many times is your characters, the trope or the character background you get is I was this, but I'm that.
Right.
I start out as everyone around me is the worst, but I became better because of it, or some other epic triumph that you make as a character. The arc that each player does uh, to themselves to create an arc that makes them excited usually stems from I'm different from the norm. So to get away from race and the tropes that are like associated with it and go into species and then allow those backgrounds and feats to just tie into the origins, tie into that. So now your origin has a lot more to do with how you develop as a character.
And I think some people might find themselves making the argument that this customization and this fluidity, it kind of flattens the game out a little bit, right? Because now, as you can kind of turn everything to anything, you don't have some of the levels of specialization that in some games, those quirks can add a lot of personality to it. But I think the argument that I would make is, again, those rules are there if you want to, if you want to again restrict those. If you're running a Dark Sun campaign, magic's a much rarer thing. you can run that. It's still there for you, and you can enforce those rules, right? 5e as a system exists in, like, there's the Lord of the Rings 5e game, right? It has its own setting, its own rules, its own tweaks, but at least for the fundamental core rules of 5th edition D&D, it's like the curb cutting effect. So for those who don't know, the curb cutting effect is effectively what happened was, if you are on a sidewalk, usually like by a corner or whatever, the curb cut is
Right.
that
Yeah.
little
Sure.
gradient, that slope that'll come down. Those were initially put in to help people who, right, needed use of like a wheelchair or some other kind of mobility device.
Right.
Now, it was put in to help that, relatively smaller group of the population. But the curb cutting effect was that by helping a smaller group for a very specific purpose in a very specific way, that had positive ramifications for people who were not part of that target group. So the basic
Right.
example is, if you had, like, now with a slope, a family who's pushing a stroller is now able to has
Right.
has an easier time getting it up onto that curb. That's the curb cutting effect. And what you have here is basically an example of that, but instead of it being for, right, people who, need a gradient and a curve to help with their mobility and help them navigate around, it's, for us nerds playing Dungeons and Dragons and people we want to show the game to.
Yeah, the idea of by simplifying some of the things for entry, you've actually made it better for those who have been longtime players.
Hmm.
You found ways to make oh, okay, that actually is streamlined. That makes it easier for me to understand.
Hmm.
It makes your gameplay better. The flow of this game is everything to me. The pace and flow has a lot to do with how your players enjoy it. If you're stagnant and you're constantly looking up rules because you're not prepared, the game suffers. If you're prepared, and the way this is laid out, especially the Player's Handbook, much what we talked about, I can't wait for the DMG to come out to see how they lay it out. It's going to be much more streamlined for the user, and I think that just benefits everybody and benefits the way the game is going to get played over time.
Hmm. Um, I think those are some of the biggest ones. I've, like, legitimately, there's just so much in this book, so many small and large things to talk about. I'm sure people, anyone who's in a player who has their favorite class, will find all kinds of new stuff. All the new subclasses are super cool, and just
Right.
some of the tweaks to the rules and the new stuff everyone's getting. Um, Sean, are there any other, like, things that stand out in particular to you, like small or large? I give you a pretty large one that we both were gawking about earlier.
Well, yeah, for me, I tend to, if I'm going to play a character, if I'm going to play, which is very rare, I tend to always play barbarians and fighters and the more simple martial classes because I just find them more fun. I just
Mhm.
like to be the upfront attack. So I liked how in barbarians, how the stone's endurance, which used to be the only thing you could do as a reaction, now they have flavored versions depending on which
Oh, I didn't see
giant
that.
class or that I thought that was kind of cool that you can inflict an extra D10 of fire damage because your Goliath path or your barbarian path took you through the fire giants, and there's different parts of that I thought were neat. And Stone's endurance, or I thought was really fun was the hill giants tumble, where you, you can elect to knock a player prone because
Right.
you have this because you're and it kind of flavors to that style of fighter and as a barbarian which path you decided to take. I thought they expanded that, and I thought that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that.
For the stream, I made a druid, and I took the star, the circle of stars, which I cannot remember if they are a player's handbook, or sorry, if they're a pre-existing 2014 edition subclass. I know they're not in the original PHB, but I don't know if they're in one of the others. But what was really cool to see, it's just a new spell. And I didn't read all the spells. I'll be clear, I don't know all the new spells, but I saw Starry Wisp, which is a new cantrip,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
so nice because I hate that a lot of the ranged cantrips that spellcasters get are kind of limited, especially on the non-wizard classes. And
right.
Starry Wisp is just, it's a blast of light, which to me is so nice as something thematically to do different than Acid Splash. And on
Yeah,
top of that, it makes the target glow, and I believe lose their invisibility too. So it's kind of like a ranged, damaging fairy fire, which is really cool.
yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I think that's a fun little cantrip, another little twist. That's what they did. They kind of expanded the ideas and
Hmm.
took parts from everybody, and they did a really good job of it all the way around. How it's going to affect or how it's going to affect the Vanguard and how we're going to play our games. That's to be told. And I think we're going to have many discussions on how we're going to implement the new rules, because I think
Definitely.
I know that those who are listening, our players want to. They see there's new advantages, they see there's new things, they want to explore those characters, and of course, we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, and then I mean, we've been beating around this one. Sean, this is the part of the reason this book it looks less like a textbook than the 2014 one is the 2014 had some good art. Dude,
Oh,
2024, oh my god.
the
And more
art
of it.
in this is so much more of it. It's so layered. Oh, it's really the art is it just for that alone. Just to
Mhm.
look at the book for the art is so inspiring in your stories, and so inspiring as a to want to play this game. It is really good.
And because like I know part of why I love the Monster Manual so much and why I'm so excited for the new Monster Manual is because it's just a book of evocative, cool art to flip through. And there were two things that stuck out to me. One, so again, taking the ideas of the previous books and all they've learned over the course of this edition. So in starting, I think with Xanathar's Guide to Everything, they started doing whenever they added a new subclass, they added an image of that subclass. So it made it
Right,
easy to make a distinction between, this is what this. I'm going to use druid because I made a druid. This is what this type of druid might look like, right? This is what this is meant
right,
to visually evoke in your mind. And now they took that and did it in this book as well. So those base subclasses also have it. And if I might say, by comparison, these new pieces of subclass art, I hope they do for every book because the old ones were good. By comparison, the old ones look like shit.
yeah. They were really good, but this next level,
Oh
they
my
really
god.
took it. They stepped up, and you definitely get a feeling that they wanted to make sure it visually appealed to players and users across the board. This is a very user friendly book.
Yeah, even oh my god, the art on the background actually was one of the things I looked at. I was like, oh my god, this is so cool, and this is just so much better now. Because not only like the backgrounds are already way more important because they're part of your origin, right? Backgrounds are more important because they give you a feat, they give you your ability score, like cool. But
Right,
that's not what made me notice the backgrounds when I first flipped through the book. I first noticed the backgrounds because now, and I love they're laid out different because they're that banner style. Now
yeah,
every background as well has a piece of art to go with it. And I even like how that art isn't necessarily like this is what a criminal looks like, this is what a guard looks like. It's location, kind of
right,
implying again,
right,
evoking your background, where you might have come
right,
from. Just as some kind so that,
right.
I might have come from a seedy underbelly or some kind of palisade, castle fortress thing, like just blown away.
The rich kid whose parents were, murdered in front of him, who runs off to become uh, an Avenger.
Yeah, I don't know if there's
Um,
family man in those
well,
backgrounds. We should have looked
uh,
because Jesus, there's God. The one thing I don't want to be, I'd rather be an adventurer than a family of an adventurer.
well, yeah, but you know, the idea of Batman comes to mind.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I think that the way this is laid out, it inspires players to explore so many more different avenues for their character development that become organic, that become more unique to that player, and which then allows them to embrace that character, which then adds to the game because when they're into their characters and the DM's into your story, you've got a win-win situation.
Right. They codified more things in the rules. The influence action and the study action, which are
Yeah,
now like a formal hey, you want to make a roll to try and like make a big speech and persuade someone to stop attacking or you misunderstand or whatever. Like that's now a combat action specifically or
right.
an action to do specifically. The study action as well to being able to observe something and potentially recall knowledge. And I'd say to players who are like, oh, but my DM let me do that as a bonus action. To me as a DM, I read that and I think, ooh, now it's not just like depending on what they say, we do it on the moment, but now that it's an action and I'm thinking of it in the terms of an action, I'm like, oh, it gives it more weight, which then for
Well, of
me
course.
has me, it's that like, it's a small thing, it's silly, but even then it just gives me this extra little oomph to make me think like, all right, cool. God, all right, if they're willing to spend their action on it. Like, all right, cool. That, you know what I mean? It feels more impactful in the moment as a way to interact with that game rule. And again, that's just a wording change that for me personally as a DM already has me tweaking just a little bit of how I might run some of the games.
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of the things that are kind of cool is the way they reworded things that allow the DMs to have a little bit more custom ability in how their encounters work.
Mm-hmm.
But as players, you also don't feel so disconnected from a reactionary point. You feel like you actually feel connected into it and you can do more with your character because of the options they've given you. I think that's kind of fun. There's a lot more to this book that we could absolutely get like probably should do another episode on this.
Yeah, honestly, there's a lot. I think I was gonna say, do you have any quibbles? Any negatives that hit you? Anything different for you? I have a
I
side
mean,
grade. I have a change. Not better, not worse.
yeah, I won't really say that. Here's what I'll say about it. This 2024 and 2034 will be completely different. So this is a great what they've come from 2014 to now and where they can go in the future. Yes, there are going to be things that they're going to work out. A lot of it to me becomes to how is it played?
Mm-hmm.
How is this new rule system implemented into your game? And how do you feel as a DM and how do you feel as players that you are getting the most out of it? Does this 24 only time's going to tell. Does the 2024 rule book, Player's Handbook do that? Time's going to tell. I don't think
Yeah.
there's really any way to know.
My one, it's not even a quibble because again they gave me something even better. Is they have the planes of existence on page 344. That
I do like that.
that section of text used to be longer in the
Mhm.
player's handbook. It's shorter now. That's my complaint. But the trade-off is the art they give of the great wheel cosmology is so much more again as a DM, just looking at that and understanding how it works. It's instead of the 2014 version that looked like a scroll you'd get somewhere in a library, which was cool. Now I look at it and I say, oh god, I want to run an adventure there. It just from the art alone. God, that yeah, that's it. That's honestly that's my summary. The most negative thing I have to say about this book is it's different than what I'm used to, so it's breaking my habits, but I acknowledge they're better. And my only other negative is they changed something I like, but they gave me way better art, so it doesn't really bug me. Like those are my negatives. That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah. Yeah, fair. That's fair. I feel the same way. The things they changed aren't egregiously changed. They don't make me, oh no, they ruined it. I think they tried very, very well to adapt and grow with from 2014 to now, and I
Mhm.
think they did a really good job, personally.
Yep. The only thing I hear they ruined is apparently sorcerers. I'm kidding. I'm gonna make it up. I'm kidding. Nothing. Nothing. No, I legitimately like they. This is. I mean, I think it's coming through in the both of this. Like this book is so cool. Like this is. I am beyond excited. I have had so much fun reading through this. I want to dig through and read more of it. And it, if this is any indication of what is coming for the future of fifth edition D&D, then I I mean that's a wrap. I guess I'm
Yeah,
gonna keep playing it.
yeah, I'm super excited too. The is this 5.5? Is this D&D 1? Where are they headed? It's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, this is a great step in the right direction. I'm really excited to see where this is going.
Yep. So, all right. Well, yeah, there you go. There's your bullet point. The Vanguard our review. It is 5.5 stars out of 5.5, I guess. Way more usable, way more customizable, and yeah, I totally recommend it. If you haven't picked it up yet, again, even if you're just D&D curious, I think this is super great.
Yeah, me too. It's a very good book, and support your local game shop and get it from there. And
Definitely.
you would definitely be happy that you did.
Yep. So, well, with that, Sean, we have something really cool. To go back to our regular game that we do, we want to talk about next episode. So next week is our September from when we're recording this. We're recording this on the 30th. Next Tuesday will be our October session, and we're running a very special event. And
Yep.
we thought for our next topic, we want to talk to you guys about not just running special events for your big group games, kind of like what we're doing, but we'll do it through the lens of what we have upcoming. So we'll talk about the planning process and behind the scenes of how we organize this special October event we have happening, and we'll of course get to debrief on it, which I'm very excited for. So yes, our next episode is going to be about, anyone who's been playing our game knows this, and I'm just teasing it out for listeners, but we're talking about the Night of Falling Stars,
which is going to be awesome. We've always tried to push the envelope on what we're going to do with our players and how our game could, consistently evolves. This Night of Falling Stars is going to be amazing. I'm so excited to bring it to our players, but also excited to talk about it the next day. Like, oh my God, it's
yeah,
so much fun.
We tease it more, but our players do listen, and we can't say everything we're planning for Night of Falling Stars until after they've experienced it, so that's why you guys will have to leave on that note. But to give you something to discuss in the meantime, we actually have 2 questions of the episode this time that we want to see everyone drop in the comments for sure. Please, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, or even if you're on Spotify, hey, pop over to YouTube, give us a comment. We read every single one, and we love the discourse, and we love interacting with our players and with our listeners and with our viewers. But one, if you have the Player's Handbook, what's one cool thing that you like about it? One thing you found that stood out to you? Can be new, can be something that, like me, isn't new, but they didn't lay it out well in the last one, so you saw it now. But like, what's something that stood out to you? Bonus points if it's not something we already mentioned. And then a follow-up one, just because, I mean, we fans are always looking for what's next. What did they miss? What is the critical omission from the 2024 book that, I'm going to phrase it in a more positive way. What is it you are excited for the D&D 5.75 edition handbook slated for release in 2034? What is the thing they did not put in the 2024 book still that you want in the 2034 book? That's what we want to know. So what did you find, and what is it you didn't find but you can't wait to see in 10 years? But yeah, that's all we have to talk about for this episode. Sean, this has been such a blast, and I'm so excited. Yet again, for everybody who's listening, please do us a favor, like, comment, subscribe. Go check us out on twitch.tv/Vanguard Guild DND. Watch the live test stream. Forgive us for the audio issues, and get ready. We will see you as well, not just for our next episode on the Night of Falling Stars, but November 3rd for Tabletop for Chop.
Absolutely. We do also going to probably do another test, I think, at some point coming up.
Yep.
That will also live stream to Twitch. Please, subscribe, like all the stuff that Nathan's been talking about. It's so huge for us, and we put a lot of effort into making this fun. So I hope you all enjoy it, and check us out in the next one.
Yep. Check us out in the next one. Thank you again, Sean. And thank you everyone for listening. Thank you everyone on YouTube for watching yet another episode of the Vanguard Chronicles podcast. We hope you had as much fun as we did recording it. While you're here, go ahead and please answer the question of the week down in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, help us out with those metrics, and absolutely subscribe so you know when more of our content's coming. Sean, I had a great time, and I hope you did, and I can't wait to see everyone on the next one.